Hi everyone, I'm meteorologist Jacob Wycoff with a check of the latest on Hurricane Lee. Still a major Category 3 storm. The 11 a.m. advisory has come in holding true to 115 mile per hour max sustained winds. Now, the one thing I see right off the bat is it looks like some shear is kind of tearing away at the structure of this storm, but it's still intact. The National Hurricane Center still says it's a very dangerous storm. The latest track of this storm and the latest forecast has this being strengthened as it goes into more favorable waters, more conducive environment for this to gather some strength as we go into the next 24 to 48 hours or so. Notice that easterly track and then northerly track. So we'll be watching to see how this plays out, how late that turns northward is going to really factor into how it plays out for us. What we're thinking at the moment is there's going to be this trough that sets up, this upper level low that sets up through the Great Lakes. And as that swings through for us next week in New England and really the eastern seaboard, it's looking like it's going to kick Lee out to sea and provide us only sort of a glancing blow, sort of fringe impacts, if you will. So that's the good news. We would much rather take fringe impacts than a direct landfall from a strong hurricane. Now, the model consensus has this pretty strong, pretty good, remarkably consistent model consensus over the next 48 hours or so. But as this turns to the north, we start to see that model trend widen a little bit. But we have this saying in meteorology, the trend is our friend. And in this case, that is very true because the trend is actually taking this a little bit farther out to sea, where yesterday at this time, we still had parts of New England under the potential impacts. I still think that that could be in the cards for us, but the trend is continuing to take it a little bit farther away from us. That's what we want to see. We do not want to see it kind of floating back to the west. The one impact that I do think we will see quite a bit of is some really intense wave action at our coastlines. That means beach erosion, potentially some splashover or coastal flooding. As we go into Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, we're going to notice the waves really starting to pick up at our coastal spots. Now, we're still about 6 to 8 days away from any sort of potential landfall along the eastern seaboard. And I really think if you took a line and you drew sort of New Jersey, Delaware area and south, you're basically out of any sort of landfalls. New England, still a slight chance that we talk about a bigger impact, but again, the trends are taking this away from New England. Again, we want to see that. Now, interestingly, in order to get data, we have these hurricane hunters that fly airplanes into the middle of these storms. One thing that I noticed in one of the latest observations or the latest discussions from the National Hurricane Center is notice these wobbles here in the path of some of these storm chasers, these aircraft that fly into the eye. Well, they encountered such turbulence, there were mesovortices that were forming right around the eye wall that they had to kind of divert and change their mission a little bit. Normally they try to puncture and go right through that eye wall. They were not able to in some of the overnight missions because of the type of storm that was underway. And so I thought that was very interesting and kind of telling that we could be talking about a storm that is re-strengthening. Now, this is a storm that's going to be going through some water that is conducive for it to strengthen. We are expecting this to become yet again a Category 4 storm, but as it makes that turn to the north, it's going to be following in the wake of Hurricane Franklin and also Idalia, sort of that scar in the ocean, if you will, of some upwelled colder water. So it's not as supportive of this staying as a stronger hurricane. Good news for us, too. So the latest, what we know, this is a powerful hurricane. We're going to be tracking this into next week. It looks like it's going to kind of split the goalposts between the East Coast and Bermuda. What we're still fine-tuning is just how close it's going to be to us in the eastern seaboard and specifically coastal New England. We're still 6 to 8 days away from having any sort of bigger impacts that could affect us. It's not crazy that we're talking about these hurricanes the way that we are because we're almost approaching the peak historically speaking, of tropical season. Normally between August 20th and October 10th, about 2/3 of all tropical systems form. And so it's not unheard of to have two systems that we're watching. There's Lee, there's Margot. Margot also expected to kind of track to the northwest as we go into the coming days, but pose no threat to land. So if we are to track any additional storms, the next one would be Nigel. The good news is Nigel, not anywhere to be found on the maps at the moment, and the National Hurricane Center is just tracking those two storms. Now, of course, we'll have much more on WBZ News on air and online. For the latest, follow us there. For now, I'm meteorologist Jacob Wycoff. Have a great weekend.